Hey there, Cube Nation. We are back from our holiday break, finally, for our first live event of the year. We're so excited to be back. We took a long time off, and now we get to chat with you again. Today, if you're anything like me, you're going to welcome this topic of healthy snacks, healthy foods to kickstart my new year. Get rid of all the crap that I may or may not have consumed in large amounts over the past few weeks. So we're going to go to healthy foods now. Let me just remind you while we're going that you can send in any questions you have about the Cube, about what we're doing here. Make comments as you're watching. We'll be watching on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube to see all the comments or questions you might be having right now while we're talking about a lot of these healthy foods. Before I get into the actual foods that we're doing, let me talk about why foods that go in a freeze dryer and come out are actually healthy compared to other ways of preserving the food. Always remember that the only thing that you pull out of food in a freeze dryer is the water. The vitamins stay, the nutrients stay, the shape of the food stays. So everything else that's there remains because all you do is pull out the water. So when you put milk duds in, all the vitamins, you get the idea. All the crap that was still there still comes back just in a much better form. So today we're going to talk about doing healthy foods to help you kickstart the new year. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was blueberries. Because blueberries are such a favorite of so many people, freeze-dried, including me, I've found so many uses for freeze-dried blueberries, whether it's going in my breakfast cereal, in my oatmeal, or just straight into my mouth, my favorite way personally, or into a glass of water to give it a little bit of flavor, into smoothies, all of these things. And remember, they're shelf stable. So I just happened to come across a huge sale on blueberries. I'm not sure why, in the middle of January, but I got 4 flats of blueberries at a really great price. So I am freeze drying them all, and I can use them now for the next several months through the winter. Let me show you here, these blueberries. They look so good. Now, there's a catch to this when you're freeze drying blueberries, and you may have learned this by doing other research online or talking to us personally or whatever. Blueberries, while they're a favorite, they're also a difficult one to freeze dry. Let me tell you why. 2 reasons. The first is the skins of blueberries are pretty tough and impermeable, so they don't let the moisture come out very easily, which means you have to puncture every single one for it to dry. The second thing that makes blueberries difficult is that when they get overripe, their internal parts turn into syrup. And syrup doesn't dry, even in a freeze dryer. So when it's done, check the blueberries on the tray and make sure that they are all dry. Some of them just will never dry because they've gotten too far overripe, too much sugar inside. Thankfully, I didn't find too many of them in this batch. But let's talk about puncturing the skins. I've seen lots of different methods, and I'm going to show you here what I have done, which is a meat tenderizer. Has needles here on the end. They're really sharp. I've heard of people freezing them and then putting them in the blender for a moment. But The best and most effective way that I have found is this meat tenderizer. I will show you how easy it works. I just go along, make sure I don't miss any, so don't move too far. And I just push these needles into the blueberries. If any of them stick to the end of the meat tenderizer and they squish down too far, those are typically the ones I can count on not drying in the end because they were too ripe. So I'm going to hold these up here to the camera so you can see closer. Because the blueberries are nice and plump and firm, all we did is puncture them and they're still in their same form. These are going to go straight into the freezer now to freeze them so that they can be freeze dried later. So remember, go find a meat tenderizer like these. There's lots of them on Amazon and they work really well, and there's lots of juice. As you can see, I've just made a mess all over this. But these blueberries will dry well because they've been punctured, and when they're done, they'll be my healthy candy because that's what they taste like when they come out. The next thing that we want to talk about is apples. Now, apple slices, freeze-dried, are so good. They taste like everything else, like all the rest of the fruit that we freeze-dry. They taste like candy. But slicing a whole bunch of apples is really hard. So we thought we'd show you the trick that's not so new, but one that we have found goes hand in hand with freeze drying so perfectly. Go find one of these corer slicer, I don't know what it's actually called. It's called a fruit slicer corer thingy. Just know it's called a thingy. So after I've washed my apples, got it all set in place, and I'm just gonna now turn the apple through the blade. It's taking the peel off. And through the corer section. And now you've got this apple slinky. I wonder if we can get it to go down the stairs. That'd be kind of cool. But here's the other part about this that I love. One of the tricks that we've learned. We have lids that we created, right, to go on top of the trays so that they freeze easily. But especially during the harvest season, during summer, when things are in season, I don't have space for a whole bunch of trays in my freezer. And so I've had to come up with a different way to do that. So my pre-freezing looks like this. And it works really well with apples, by the way. What I'm gonna do is just cut right down the center of this. And now I end up with a whole bunch of apple slices, just like this, that are easy to eat. And so I'll just load, this is a regular half cookie sheet or half sheet, regular cookie sheet that we might put in our oven with chocolate chip cookies on it, or cranberry orange cookies. But so I line the bottom of the cookie sheet with a silicone mat, again just a typical one that you'd buy on Walmart or the grocery store, And once I've got it all lined like that, I'll take another one, set it on top, and do another layer. And I believe with apples cut like this, I can do 6 or 7 layers of apples. That's more than I can freeze dry in one batch, and that's usually about a dozen or maybe 15 apples cut and sliced like that. So that's a lot of apples. And by the time I put them in the freeze dryer using the extended racks, then I have a bag, a gallon bag overfull of dried apples. This is one of those snacks that you can just sit and eat really fast and really easily, but it's a healthy snack that replaces something like crackers or chips. Maybe not completely, because we love our Pringles, right? But apple chips, as it were, like this, are a great replacement, and they give you good energy too. So in your effort, like me, to start a new year, new goals, apples are one of the things that I'm adding to my diet to replace some of the things that I probably shouldn't have had anyway. All those holiday treats are catching up to me. But now I'm going to start a new year. One other thing that we're going to show you tonight are applesauce cubes. Now again, this is just a silicone mold. You can find them at a lot of kitchen supply stores or on Amazon. They're 1/2-inch cubes. They work perfectly for the snacks that we have at our house. And I just got regular old applesauce, treetop applesauce from the store. And you just fill the silicone mold like this. I didn't quite put enough applesauce in, as you can see. And I'll fill the rest of the mold later. But these are so easy again to just eat and eat and eat. Again, a healthier snack. We get unsweetened applesauce, so it's even more healthy. But you wouldn't know it by the time you're actually eating it. The other part that my family loves to do in this, in fact, I have some here, is that we'll dump this into a bowl, pour a bunch of cinnamon in it, mix it up, and then put them in the molds. And we end up with cinnamon applesauce cubes that look like this. Maybe we can get a close up. As you can see, and these are great out hiking or just taking a walk. If I get started, you might just have to stand here and wait for me to finish eating them, because I'll eat them the rest of the night. But again, cinnamon apples. Now, it tastes kind of like apple crisp, I guess it is, but healthy. So try that. You could also do a little bit bigger cubes and put chopped up oats in it, add a little protein from the oats. In fact, one of the things that we are going to be doing here shortly at our home is pureed blueberries, adding applesauce in that, and adding oatmeal and making bars using our tray dividers. And we'll likely put that recipe on the website later, so keep watching for it. So just remember that the freeze dryer can become your best ally in whatever diet you choose to follow. I happen to have some family members who are on very restricted diets because of health reasons. And we have found that there are so many things that we can make for them and put in the freeze dryer and dry and send to them, so they have foods that they can actually eat. I have one particular family member who's had to be on a very, very restricted diet, one I'd never even heard before. And so we learned that we could do potato chips that really were just potatoes cut up, freeze dried, add a little seasoning to them so that technically they're raw, but they still taste good, and it allows my family member to have something that replaces what they normally would have had in potato chips. So let us know, Cube Nation. Add in the notes below. Tell us what healthy alternatives to some of the snacks that are out there have you found in using your freeze dryer. Tell us about the things that you found that are revolutionizing the way that you consume food to make things a little bit healthier. We're going to check here and see if we have any questions. I'll see if my team has sent me anything here. Okay, one question that has come up is with the silicone molds here, do you have to take the applesauce out before you freeze dry it? Well, here's the answer. What I will do with this is take it and freeze it now in my freezer overnight or for a couple of days, and then I will pop them out onto the trays. You don't have to. I have freeze dried them in the silicone molds. It just takes a little bit longer. But I can also put a lot more on the tray if I pop them out. I did learn that for all of those of you who have watched a recent video we put out about the ice overload, I did learn that I cannot load edge to edge applesauce, extended rack, edge to edge again, applesauce cubes, 4 trays in here, because what I actually found out is that ended up being 2.5 gallons of applesauce by the time I did that. That was a lot of food and a lot of water compacted into a small space. I had so much ice in here. But you can load 4 trays of applesauce, and 2 of these molds does a pretty good job of filling 1 tray. So go find them on Amazon. Again, they're 1/2-inch cube. Sometimes they're called candy molds, but they're just silicone molds, and they work so well for this. Let me see if there's any other questions here while we're talking. Okay, question. Do you need to peel the apples? The answer is, if you're doing it this way, the way we did it, no, you don't. Just don't put a whole apple in the middle there of the tray and expect it to dry. The peel will prevent it from drying a fair amount. But sometimes I'll take the blade from this, just tip it back and leave the peels on, because they actually taste really good when you eat it later. My family members personally don't like the peels on apples, so most of the time I take the peels off. That's just a preference thing. But because the apples end up being thin like this, a little strip of peel on the end isn't going to affect how it dries at all. It doesn't change how it dries. Another question that came out through about the blueberries. Now, I was asked, do you have to pre-freeze the blueberries in a freezer, or can you do it in the cube? Yeah, you can, but blueberries and apples, for instance, they actually take a long time to freeze. Maybe it's because of the sugar content. But for example, if I load up that cookie sheet, like I said, 6 or 7 layers of apple slices, it will take 2 days to fully freeze those apple slices in every freezer that I've put it in. So just imagine how much time then it would take to do it in the cube or any other freeze dryer for that matter, to freeze some of these fruits that just take a little bit longer time. Also, regarding blueberries, the question came up, is the amount of blueberries that I put on that tray too much if I do 4 trays of those? The answer is no. I have successfully freeze dried that many blueberries on all 4 trays in this very freeze dryer. And it was not too much liquid. It does take a while, and don't be surprised if when you get to the end and check it, blueberries is one of the few foods that we will say it might take more time, because the last little bit of moisture come out of the blueberries is just so small that trying to get the moisture sensors to recognize that little bit is very, very hard. So you can expect that you might have to do blueberries, add 4 hours to it, and that's almost always been just enough time for the blueberries that I've ever done. Let me check on our questions here again. Okay. We had a question that came up not on what we discussed today, but on another video that we actually put out recently. If you go and find the video in our YouTube channel, by the way, our YouTube channel is at prep, the number 4 life, prep, the number 4 dash life. You'll find us there. And we did way, way too much cantaloupe, pureed cantaloupe in a batch. And you'll go and you'll see just how much ice was in this freeze dryer. And the question that came up was, actually it was 2 questions. One was, why did you do so much? And the answer to that was because we knew what was going to happen. So we did it so that we could help you guys understand what we kept saying about ice overload. And the second thing is, what do you do with all that pureed cantaloupe? Well, I don't know that yet, but we're going to find out. I found that there's a lot of sweet cantaloupe breads recipes out there. So we're going to try some of that. But go watch that video and you can see the pureed cantaloupe. It is really, really sweet when it comes out. So that brings us to the final thing that we're not going to display here, and that is smoothies. All of these things, once they're dry, are really easy to throw in your blender, add some water and ice, and now you've got a really good smoothie. But the other thing that you can do is actually make the smoothie. Then you can put it in, say, these silicone molds and have smoothie cubes. Those are really good. Those are things that you can add oats to or your protein powder to. Now you have a really healthy cube. Or you just put it on your tray, break it up into a powder, and then any day you want, just take some of that powder, dump it in your blender with a little bit of water and a couple ice cubes, and you've got a smoothie back on something that you had sitting on your shelf rather than taking up your freezer space. something I did a couple years ago as Christmas gifts to people, where I actually made the smoothies, figured out how much water and a couple ice cubes they needed for each little packet, and they could just put them in their pantry. Okay, Cube Nation, last chance for any questions you've got as I introduce what's coming up next week. Normally these come out every other week, but we took some extra time in the beginning of the year and decided to postpone our very first event, this one, until tonight. But next week, Tuesday in the afternoon, we are going to talk about making our own emergency kits, like our own 72-hour kits. Here's a little homework for you, Cube Nation, before that happens. Go out and research what goes into a 72-hour kit worth of food. You can look at prices, look at what's in them, figure out all the things that somebody else has said you need in your 72-hour kit, right? And you're gonna find a lot of empty calorie fillers, like energy drinks, orange energy drinks, and things like rice and mashed potatoes and some beans, but they're counting on most of the protein that you need actually being either in beans sparsely spread through the meals or oatmeal. I was surprised that that's about the extent of the protein that goes into most of the meals that go into these 72-hour kits, and that's why they're so cheap. They don't have any meat in them. Not that you have to have meat, but my opinion is, if you're going to create an emergency kit and you have the ability, why not put foods in it that you like putting in it? So next week, we're going to talk about that. Making 72-hour kits out of food that you and your family actually want to eat. The problem may be they'll actually go eat them when it's not an emergency, but so what? Make another one. That's the thing about having a freeze dryer of yourself, is that when you're creating your own emergency preparedness foods and food storage, it's food that you actually want to eat. So join with us next time. I'll do one last check here for any questions. It looks like we answered all of them tonight. Cube Nation, keep coming back to watch. Subscribe to the channel so you get all of this news and all of the information about how to use your cube and how it can change the way that you consume, prepare, and enjoy food. Have a good night.